All right, so at 38 years old, I was working for a company called Enron. Yeah, you probably heard of that. Back in the late 90s, I was working for Enron when they folded up. Well, back then it was a little bit different than it is now. We had a 401k plan and had very little matching with Enron. It was only like 2%. So, we weren't getting a lot of contribution, but they were giving us retirement bonuses into our 401k, and they were pretty substantial. After every job, we would get a retirement bonus, and it really helped out and it really built it up. Well, when Enron went under, I'm sitting here at 38 years old, and I had almost $100,000 in that account, and basically it was flush. There was just not a whole lot left. It was, under $5,000 that I had left when everything went bye-bye. Like I say, you couldn't take, at that point in time, you could not take the company stock and sell it or trade it like you can now. So basically to say, I started over again at almost 40 years old. And a lot of people are 40 years old. You can look at the statistics and really haven't saved a whole lot. So here's another thing. If you start saving and you're 20 years old, which most of you watching this video are probably not 20 years old, but if you're 20 years old and you save $100 a month and you get a 10% return on your investment, by the time you're 65, you got $1 million. That's not too bad, right? But now let's try that at age 40 and see what you get. Well, you start saving only $100 a month at age 40, and guess what? You got about $135,000 when you hit 65 years old. And that's it. That's at a 10% return, which is not a bad target. It's a little aggressive for me when I'm trying to figure out my retirement. I don't normally figure 10%. I normally figure between 6 and 8. But anyway, yeah, if you wait until you're 40 to start, you're not going to have a whole lot when you hit 65 if you only save that much. So a lot of people are going to tell you to save 10% of your salary. And 10% is a good benchmark if you're starting pretty early. But if you're not starting early, 10% probably is not going to get it. And there's a lot of calculators out there, a lot of online calculators, or you could go out and talk to a financial advisor and get a plan built up and take a look at what it's going to take for you to have a retirement at the age that you want to retire. I think that's kind of the trick, is a lot of people are giving up and just saying, I'm going to work till I'm 70. Well, the problem is over half of Americans, I shouldn't say over, but half of Americans are being forced into retirement either because of health conditions or because their company is forcing them out or going bankrupt or downsizing or whatever. And when you're in your late 50s, early 60s, it is hard to find a job that's going to pay back as much as what you're making now, because you've built up that career, you've been working there a while. So a lot of times what you have to do is you have to bridge retire or go to work somewhere for less money and still draw your retirement benefits. So when you start thinking about retirement, it's not always about making more money. Sometimes it's about the company you work for. Like I say, I was 38 years old and basically starting over again. And I won't say it was totally on purpose, but I went to work for a company that also had a pension plan and a 7% match in the 401k. Now, the pension plan wasn't anything like you get with the government or the railroad. It wasn't, it's not going to fully subsidize, what you're making when you retire, but it really does help. And, you can count on that somewhat, because we could take it as a lump sum if we wanted to, or we could take monthly payments. So it was a really good program for me, because I was having to start over at 40. So unless I wanted to, just completely maximize my 401k and everything I could put into it, and then be putting some in an IRA on top of that, which is pretty tough when you're 40 years old, because when you're 40, your kids are teenagers. Yeah. And it's really hard. You think younger children are expensive. Wait until they get to be teenagers, and then they go to college, and we paid their college tuition. So having that pension as a backup was the third leg of that stool. That three-legged stool really helped out a lot. So sometimes it's not always about how much a job pays, it's about the benefits that go along with that job. So when we did settle down at this job, we're living in a small town in Texas. We bought a very modest, smaller home, and I took a 15% pay cut. But what we wanted stability. The job I was at before was more working construction, and we moved around all the time. And, our kids were going into middle school and elementary school at the time. They're 4 years apart. And it just wasn't working out real well for them. So we decided to basically settle down. Like I say, I had to take a pay cut. Well, luckily we went into it, with having our bills paid down. I did some consulting work right before we came here, and we kind of got caught up on everything, got most of our bills paid down. Like I say, bought a modest house, lived in this small town, and took out a 15-year mortgage on the house. So that really helped out in the back end too. We had that house paid off, fairly early and well before we went into retirement. So another thing we did over the 24 years in my career out here is we stayed very consistent in the 401k. We didn't borrow against it, which a lot of people will do. And to me, it sounds okay to borrow against it if you say it real fast and you're going to pay yourself back with interest. But the interest doesn't keep up with inflation, nor does it keep up with how much you're going to make in the market, your market returns. So I would always hedge against borrowing against your 401k. To me, they have all kinds of different loans. They have mortgages, they have car loans, they have education loans, but the one loan they don't have a retirement loan. Nope, when you get to be 62 or however old you are when you retire, they're not going to loan you money to retire. Sorry, they're just not going to do it. And another thing we did is when I got my raises and bonuses and things like that, we didn't run out and buy a new house, buy a more expensive house. A lot of people will do that, and a house can be a great investment. I'm not saying that, I'm not taking away from that at all. But when you get to be in your mid 40s to your 50s, and you don't have a lot of equity, which we did not have a ton of equity in this house, it just didn't make sense to upgrade our house. We could have used some more rooms, some more bedrooms, and things like that, but it didn't make financial sense. So that's another thing we did. We kept a positive cash flow throughout the years so that we were spending less than what we were making, and that really helped out in being able to retire at 61 years old. So I will say that one thing that I feel that I did wrong was I didn't build up a good emergency fund, and I wasn't used to having that emergency fund. And that kind of hurt me a little bit when I got into retirement, because I wasn't used to it, and I didn't have, that 3 to 6 months of money that I was used to having all the time. The main reason for that is my wife and I are great with money that we never see. As long as it comes out and it goes in a 401k or it goes to some other account, we never see it, we're great, we don't touch it. But if we got it in our bank account, we tend to spend it. And we're not the greatest with money when it comes to that, for sure. So we never really were used to holding on to cash, having an emergency fund. We always had maybe a month's worth, but we didn't have the 3 to 6 months like you really should have. So I wished we'd have trained ourselves to do that and gotten more used to that. I think it would have helped out a lot when we got into retirement. So I'd like to pause the video for a minute and ask you if you'd go down below and leave me a comment. Just let me know where you're from. Let me know what you think is one of the problems that you may have if you're going to be going into retirement, or if you're in retirement, one of the things you struggled with, and share that with the other people in the community. So what would I recommend if I were going to do it all over again? I would start out with first building up that emergency fund. Before I even worried about, building up a nest egg and 401k and all that, I would go ahead and build up a 3 to 6 month emergency fund and keep that funded at all times and keep it separate from your regular account. You know, don't let it fluctuate. Just keep it in there for emergencies. Then I would set up my spending so I'm only spending, you know, 75 to 80% of what my take-home pay is. The other 20 to 25% I would be investing in a 401k, IRA, or something along those lines. But I would be investing it. I wouldn't just be saving it, because your emergency fund really isn't going to be making much money. It's going to just be sitting there. Where your investment funds are going to be keeping up with inflation and, you know, hopefully doing better than inflation and actually building and growing as they go. A few other things you can think about. Number one is keep up with your health. And it's hard when you're working. I found it's actually much easier to keep up with my health now that I'm retired because I can put more thought into it and I have more time. But when you're working, it can be really hard to keep up with your health because of all the stress, and just sometimes the way you eat, you know, isn't very good, isn't very healthy. So keep up with your health, because that is a big expense in retirement. I'm telling you, I was really surprised how much I'm spending on my health, on doctor visits and things like that. Of course, I had a pretty rough first year, but go ahead, maintain your health and keep that up. It will save you a lot of money in retirement. The other thing I would recommend is go ahead and get a retirement plan done. Yeah, pay somebody $500 or $1,000 to go ahead and work you up a retirement plan. And if you look down in the pinned comments, there's a website, and in that website there's a few downloads, and you don't have to do anything. It's all completely free. You don't even have to leave your email address. And I've got some downloads in there of things that you would need to know to go to talk to a financial advisor, and information to go ahead and gather to make that meeting as productive as possible. That way you're not guessing at it, and he can build you a really good plan. So that's one thing I would do, is go ahead and get a retirement plan done. That way you know what your target is and you can keep on track. The other thing is, if you're just way behind the 8 ball, you can think about a bridge retirement, which is basically, you know, stopping work at your full-time job and working part-time somewhere and taking your retirement benefits on top of that and bridging that retirement until you can, you know, get to the point where you're on Social Security and, you know, all of it works out for you. So I hope you've gotten a little bit out of this video, and if you have, please reach down and hit that like button and watch this video next.